Hi, and welcome to the Morasha podcast. On this episode, we talk folk oils. Now, we get a lot of questions from you guys, in particular, these two on folk oils. One being, how do you choose the right folk oil for your motorcycle? And the second, what difference does changing the folk oil weight make to the way my bike feels? What we did was we thought we'd get an expert to answer these questions. We called up Kunal from Slipstream Performance, who does suspension rebuilds on a daily basis, and we know he knows everything about it in and out. So we got him on, and this is what he had to say.
So today I'm going to be talking about suspension oil. I'm going to specifically be talking about fork oil, but the same information I'm giving you applies to shock fluid as well. So you get suspension oils in various nominal weights. Keep this term in mind, guys, as it's going to be important later. For example, when we talk about nominal weight, it's what you actually see on the packaging. So you can get suspension fluid all the way from say 2.5, 3, and there'll be a W at the end of it, or a WT, which means that's the weight of the oil. So it's 2.5. You can get 3, 5, 7.5, 10, 15, 20. And I was basically asked to talk about fork oils. As we at the workshop, as well as the guys at Moto Asher India, get a lot of questions about what fork oil is best for different applications of motorcycles. And it seems like a straightforward answer, but it's actually not. You would think that, the obvious answer to what oil you to use in your fork or your suspension is you go look in the service manual for your particular model, and you go with the specification that's in the manual, or the nominal suspension weight that's mentioned there. But in reality, unless you're able to get the exact oil specified in the service manual, that would be the exact manufacturer. So if it's Yamaha, it'll have to be Yamaha fork oil, for example. Or if it's a Kayaba or Showa suspension, you'd have to get the exact Kayaba or Showa suspension. For most of us out here, it's in reality, you're not going to be able to do that. And you will not be able to ensure that the fork oil that you use with the same nominal weight. So you might read that it specifies 10 weight oil in the manual, but you use a locally available oil, or not locally but like an aftermarket oil, and that oil is actually not even going to be close to what the manufacturer specification is. And this doesn't mean that the oil is not a good oil, or it's not as good as what's specified in the manual. The only thing is, or the reason why this is because suspension fluid, unlike engine oils are not standardized. So for example, which is why we use the term nominal weight. So for example, a 5 weight fork oil from Maxima, for instance, or a 5 weight oil from Motul can actually be quite different. They're going to have different characteristics, different viscosities. So the best way, or the only way to ensure that you have the correct oil for your application, is to actually compare the OEM oil used on your particular motorcycle with the fork oil that you have at your disposal. So the way to do this is you actually have this data available online, from many sources, and these guys have actually tested different suspension fluids, the OEM as well as the aftermarket, and they've compiled a list for comparison. So it makes the job much easier for guys like you and me. This is the only way to figure out if the oil you plan to use meets or exceeds the specification. And this is important to know before you decide to, if I'm going to stick with the same weight of oil, or actually change the fork oil weight. Like, we have a lot of people who, come to the workshop and they'll be like, okay, it says 5W weight, but I want stiffer suspension, or, I think I ride my bike harder, or whatever the case might be. And I think I want to upgrade my oil. But you got to remember that even though you think that you're upgrading the oil, you don't really know, exactly what oil you're getting. So there are a couple of things you need to be looking for. The data that you should be looking at is the exact fluid you see in the service manual. You start with that and you compare it to the oil that you plan to use. And we do this by basically looking at a few specifications of the oil. So obviously you're going to be looking at what brand of oil was actually used on the motorcycle. So I'm going to give you a real world example here. We had a Yamaha R1 that came in for a fork rebuild the other day, and that actually in the manual specified Yamaha 01 fork oil for a Kayaba fork. Now, if you think about Yamaha 01 fork oil, you would think that this is what is 01? Is that a 01 weight? What is it? But it's not the case. That's just their specification. So the way you're going to compare this to, for example, Maxima, which is available, and this is what I use, is I would read or be looking at the nominal weight of the oil. So in this case, there is no nominal weight. The number is just 01. Okay, we have that here on this list, which I'm looking at. And, so the oil will have a reported, centi-stokes, which is the actual flow rate of the oil, or when you pour the oil at a particular temperature, which is at 40 degrees and at 100 degrees, is going to flow differently. So that's actually going to tell you the viscosity of the oil, or how the oil flows. And the second thing we look at is you're going to be looking at the viscosity index, and this basically tells you how stable the oil is over a wide temperature. And this just doesn't mean hot days versus cold days. It also means the beginning of a race and the end of a race. So if you're really riding your bike hard, and you're doing a certain amount of laps around it, or on a racetrack or something like that, is actually going to tell you how well the oil holds up at different temperatures, different pressures, and things like that. So these are the things that you need to look at. So I'm going to go back to my real world example again. So I was talking about the R1 suspension. So the Yamaha 01 fork oil, which I'm going to be using on, or used on, the Kayaba fork. If I look at the chart here, I have a reported centi-stoke at 40 degrees of it is 15.6, and the centi-stokes at 100 degrees Celsius is 3.45, and I have the viscosity index at 150. Okay, so what you got to remember is that the higher the viscosity index number, the better the oil is going to be, or the more stable the oil is going to be over different shear loads and different temperatures, ambient temperatures, as well as the temperature inside the actual suspension component. So what I'm going to basically do is, since I plan to stick with the same oil for this particular motorcycle, I'm going to look at since I can't get the Yamaha 01 fork oil, I'm going to be looking at oil from another manufacturer, in this case Maxima. I'm going to go down the chart and basically compare it and see that the centi-stokes and the viscosity index is close to what the 01 fork oil is. So I've gone down the list and I'm looking at the Maxima Racing Fork Fluid, which is available in India. It's the 85/150 5W weight oil. So the nominal weight of this oil is 5. And if you see the oil, the centi-stokes at 40 degrees Celsius for this oil is 15.9, and it's 3.51 at 100 degrees Celsius. So if I go back and compare that to the earlier oil I was talking about, that's 15.6 and 3.45. So the Maxima oil actually has a slightly better viscosity at 40 degrees and 100 degrees Celsius. So those two specifications fit really well. And also the viscosity index is actually the same. It's 150 for the Yamaha 01 fork oil, and it's the same for the Maxima fork oil. So I by comparing this list, I know for sure that a Maxima fork oil, which is 5/8, which is specifically the Maxima Racing Fork Fluid, is going to be a perfect fit for the Yamaha R1 suspension. And if I needed to, or I plan to change the viscosity, I can go through the same list and compare a fork oil that's available, and try to get a fork oil with a better viscosity index, or a better overall viscosity at say 40 degrees and 100 degrees Celsius. So guys, this is the easiest way to actually know for sure that the fork oil that you're using or plan to use is actually the same as your OEM fork oil as a starting point. This is obviously a little bit more complicated than maybe a lot of you out there would want to, maybe wouldn't want to go through something like this. It's actually not that difficult. Depending on where you live, that also makes a difference. So if the ambient temperature is higher, for example, where you live, if you're going to be seeing summer temperatures of like 35 degrees up, you can actually start using slightly heavier oil. So you could from 5 move to 7.5. Of course, it also depends on what kind of suspension you have. If you just have a damper rod fork, you're obviously not going to use damper rod forks. The forks that you get on bikes like the Bonneville or the Interceptor. It's not the upside down cartridge forks that you see on most of the modern motorcycles or performance oriented bikes. So yeah, with the damper rod fork, you generally see forks be using all the way from 10 weight to 20 weight oil, and they're not very sensitive to changes. You can actually change the oil around, and it won't really make it's not going to make a lot of difference in the sense that the damping will either become slower or stiffer, like most of you guys that's the lingo most people use. But for cartridge forks or upside down suspension, you want to be closer to what the OEM manufacturer recommends, unless you know what you're doing, and you actually you do need like a oil with a heavier viscosity, better viscosity index. But like I said, you still need a starting point, and a good way to do that is to figure out what they actually use on the OEM, your OEM specification, and then use that and compare to what's really available, what do you have available, and then use these charts to figure out whether you're actually getting an oil that's has a better viscosity index, and it's got a better viscosity, overall viscosity as well. So yeah, I mean, this is really a wide field, a lot of things to look at, but yeah, ballpark, this is the easiest way to do it, and this is how I generally on a daily basis, this is how I ensure that the oil I'm actually putting inside a customer's motorcycle is close to what the manufacturer recommends.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. I want to hear your stories, your motorcycle experiences, what you've been doing, and how motorcycles have made your life better. So if you have something to say, DM us on Instagram, and I'll be more than happy to get you on this podcast.